Here's a fun fact about galactic politics. When you gather 47 different species together to watch a human get eaten alive by a starving monster, you're probably not on the right side of history. But apparently, nobody told the Galactic Council that, because they went ahead and organized exactly that kind of event anyway. The Grand Amphitheater of Zephyros Prime hosted the most important diplomatic gathering in 3 centuries. Representatives from 47 different species had assembled to witness what the Council was calling the ultimate demonstration of human fragility. Catchy title, right? Really rolls off the tongue, assuming you have one. Dr. Keenan Voss, the Council's lead xenobiologist, stood at the center of the arena with the smug confidence of someone who had never been wrong about anything in his entire career. Tall, thin, with the kind of pale blue skin that suggested his species had evolved in perpetual twilight, he addressed the assembled delegates with theatrical flair. "Esteemed colleagues," Voss announced, his voice amplified across the massive amphitheater. "Today, we will conclusively demonstrate why humans cannot be considered for advanced galactic citizenship. Their primitive biology and weak social structures make them unsuitable for civilized society." The human delegation sat in their assigned section, like prisoners awaiting execution. 23 individuals representing Earth's various nations and cultures, all of whom had been promised a fair evaluation of humanity's potential. Instead, they were about to become unwilling participants in what amounted to a gladiatorial exhibition designed to humiliate their entire species. At the center of the delegation sat Captain Beth Crane, a former military officer turned diplomatic attaché, who possessed the kind of calm professionalism that came from surviving situations where calm professionalism was the only thing standing between you and violent death. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation style, and her uniform bore no decorations except for a small Earth insignia that seemed almost defiant in its simplicity. The test subject, Voss continued with obvious relish, is a Shadowmaw Prime, adult male, approximately 400 kilograms of pure predatory evolution. This specimen has been deliberately starved for 7 standard days to maximize its aggressive responses. A collective intake of breath rippled through the amphitheater. Shadowmaw Primes were legendary even among apex predators. Standing 3 meters tall at the shoulder, with obsidian black fur, silver claws that could slice through starship hull plating, and intelligence that bordered on sentience, they were the reason entire star systems maintained exclusion zones around their homeworlds. "The human will be placed in the arena with this creature," Voss explained, as automated systems began lowering a massive containment unit into the center of the amphitheater. "We predict complete biological failure within approximately 30 seconds. This demonstration will prove conclusively that humans lack the survival instincts necessary for galactic society." Captain Crane stood up slowly, her movements deliberate and controlled. "Dr. Voss, I need to clarify something before we proceed. When you say complete biological failure, you mean you expect this creature to kill me?" "Correct," Voss replied without hesitation. "Though we have medical teams standing by to preserve your remains for scientific study, your sacrifice will serve the greater good of galactic understanding." The casual way he discussed her impending death would have been impressive if it weren't so thoroughly infuriating. Crane looked around the amphitheater at 47 species worth of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, all gathered to watch a human get torn apart by a starving apex predator for educational purposes. "And if I refuse to participate in this demonstration?" she asked, conversationally. "Then humanity will be classified as a cowardly species unfit for any form of galactic contact," Voss answered with satisfaction. "Your entire civilization will be quarantined indefinitely." Crane nodded thoughtfully, as if considering a mildly interesting philosophical question rather than her own imminent death. "I see. So my choices are: participate in ritual murder, or condemn my species to eternal isolation. Those are indeed your options," Voss confirmed. "Right then," Crane said, beginning to remove her diplomatic jacket with methodical precision. "Let's get this over with." The containment unit reached arena level with a resonant clang that echoed throughout the amphitheater. Inside, something massive moved with predatory grace, occasionally striking the reinforced walls with impacts that made the entire structure vibrate. The Shadowmaw Prime was very much awake, very much aware of its surroundings, and very much interested in whatever was about to happen. "Fascinating," muttered Ambassador Quillen Dex, a reptilian delegate from the hegemony of scales. The human shows no signs of elevated stress responses. Either their species lacks proper survival instincts, or this individual is suffering from severe neurological damage. More likely, suggested Director Yalon Kresh of the Silicon Collective, her crystalline form refracting the arena's lights into prismatic patterns. Humans simply don't understand the magnitude of danger they're facing. Ignorance can mimic courage quite effectively. Captain Crane finished removing her jacket and began rolling up her sleeves with the kind of methodical preparation that suggested she was getting ready for manual labor rather than mortal combat. Her movements were economical, professional, and completely devoid of the panic that any rational being should have been experiencing. Captain Crane, called out Dr. Voss. Are you experiencing any difficulty processing the situation? We can provide neural enhancement drugs to ensure you fully comprehend what's about to occur. Oh, I comprehend perfectly, Crane replied, her voice carrying clearly across the amphitheater's acoustics. You're about to release a starving apex predator and expect it to kill me for the entertainment and education of galactic high society. Did I miss anything important? The sarcasm in her tone was so perfectly delivered that several delegates actually flinched. Apparently, even facing certain death, humans couldn't resist making everyone else feel uncomfortable about their life choices. Remarkable, observed Senator Thys Valdrin of the Psionic Consortium, her ethereal form flickering with interest. The human displays cognitive dissonance. She understands the danger yet continues with behavior patterns that suggest confidence in survival. Fascinating psychological adaptation. Or, complete mental breakdown. Dex countered. The stress may have triggered protective delusions. Down in the arena, Crane had finished her preparations and stood facing the containment unit with relaxed alertness. She looked like someone waiting for a bus. If buses weighed 400 kilograms and specialized in turning other life forms into decorative wall ornaments. Release the specimen, Voss commanded. The containment unit's front panel retracted with mechanical precision, revealing the Shadowmaw Prime in all its terrifying glory. The creature stood nearly 3 meters tall, its obsidian fur seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Silver claws extended from massive paws, each one capable of splitting stone. Golden eyes, burning with intelligence and hunger, fixed immediately on the small human standing alone in the center of the arena. The amphitheater fell into absolute silence. 47 species held their collective breath, waiting for the inevitable demonstration of human fragility that would settle the question of Earth's galactic citizenship once and for all. The Shadowmaw Prime stepped out of its containment unit with fluid grace. Every movement a masterpiece of predatory efficiency. It tested the air, cataloging scents and evaluating threats with the methodical precision of an apex predator that had never encountered anything it couldn't kill. Then, it saw Captain Crane. The creature stopped moving. Not the frozen alertness of a predator preparing to strike, but complete, absolute stillness. Its golden eyes locked onto the human with an intensity that made the air itself seem to thicken with tension. Crane, for her part, remained exactly where she was. No defensive posturing, no attempt to flee, no signs of the terror that should have been consuming every fiber of her being. She simply stood there, looking back at the Shadowmaw Prime with calm interest. Why isn't it attacking? Whispered Director Kresh, her crystalline form chiming softly with confusion. Perhaps it's evaluating the threat level, suggested Ambassador Dex. Predators often assess prey before striking. Dr. Voss frowned, consulting his datapad with growing irritation. The specimen should have initiated attack behavior immediately upon detecting the human's presence. 7 days of starvation should have eliminated any hesitation. In the arena, something unprecedented was happening. The Shadowmaw Prime was approaching Captain Crane, but not with the aggressive rush that everyone expected. Instead, it moved with careful, deliberate steps, its massive head lowered in what almost looked like respect. This is not according to behavioral predictions, Voss muttered, his confidence beginning to crack around the edges. Shadowmaw Primes do not hesitate, they do not evaluate, they attack and consume. The creature stopped approximately 2 meters from Crane, well within killing distance but making no aggressive moves. Instead, it sat down. A 400-kilogram apex predator, designed by evolution to be the perfect killing machine, sat down like a well-trained pet. waiting for instructions. What is it doing? Demanded Senator Valdrin, her psionic abilities apparently unable to penetrate whatever was happening in the arena. I believe, Crane said, her voice carrying clearly across the stunned amphitheater. It's waiting for something. Waiting for what? Voss called out, his scientific curiosity warring with his growing dread that his demonstration was going horribly wrong. Crane tilted her head, studying the massive predator that was studying her right back. Food, I think. It's been starved for 7 days, right? But it won't eat unless someone feeds it properly. The suggestion was so absurd that several delegates actually laughed. The idea that a starving apex predator would refuse available prey because it wanted to be fed by hand was beyond ridiculous. It was impossible. Humans, muttered Ambassador Dex. Their capacity for self-delusion is truly remarkable. Except, the Shadowmaw Prime was still sitting there, still waiting, still looking at Captain Crane with expectant golden eyes that seemed far too intelligent for anyone's comfort. Dr. Voss, Crane called out conversationally. You wouldn't happen to have any food for this fellow, would you? He looks hungry, and I'd hate to disappoint him. The creature is a predator, Voss sputtered. It doesn't require feeding assistance. It requires prey. Right, Crane agreed pleasantly. But he's not treating me like prey, is he? He's treating me like, well, like someone he expects to take care of him. The Shadowmaw Prime chose that moment to vocalize for the first time since its release. Not a roar, not a threatening growl, but a soft, almost plaintive sound that carried clearly across the silent amphitheater. That sounded like a request, observed Director Kresh with scientific fascination. The creature is attempting to communicate rather than simply attack. Impossible, Voss insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. Shadowmaw Primes are not capable of complex social interaction with alien species. The creature made the sound again, longer this time, and somehow more urgent. Its golden eyes never left Captain Crane, who was beginning to smile in a way that made every delegate in the amphitheater suddenly very nervous. Dr. Voss, Crane said, her smile growing wider. I think your demonstration is about to teach everyone something very important about humans. Just not what you expected. The Shadowmaw Prime lowered its massive head and gently, carefully, nudged Captain Crane's hand with its nose. The gesture was unmistakably affectionate, the kind of behavior exhibited by domestic animals seeking attention from their caretakers. Oh, Crane said softly, reaching out to scratch behind the creature's ears. You're not a monster at all, are you? You're just lost and scared and hungry. And you've been waiting for someone who understands. The amphitheater watched in stunned silence as a starving apex predator, the most dangerous creature in known space, began purring like a house cat under the gentle attention of a human who was supposed to be its victim. This, Dr. Voss announced to no one in particular, is not how this was supposed to work. Captain Crane looked up at the assembled delegates with that same pleasant smile, still scratching behind the Shadowmaw Prime's ears while 400 kilograms of apex predator leaned into her touch, like it was the most natural thing in the universe. Doctor, she called out cheerfully. About that food? Dr. Voss stood frozen at the arena's edge, watching his carefully planned demonstration crumble into something that would probably require therapy to process fully. The Shadowmaw Prime had now rolled onto its back, exposing its vulnerable belly while Captain Crane provided what could only be described as professional-quality tummy rubs to a creature capable of dismantling battle cruisers. Get the emergency food supplies. Voss finally managed to croak into his communication device. Immediately. Sir, came the confused response from his research assistant. The emergency supplies are for the medical team in case of human casualties. Why would we need... Just get the food, Voss snapped, watching the apex predator wiggle with obvious delight under Crane's ministrations. And someone contact the xenopsychology department. We're going to need professional consultation on interspecies bonding behaviors. Ambassador Dex leaned forward in his seat, his reptilian features twisted into an expression of profound confusion. This violates every known principle of predator psychology. Shadowmaw Primes don't exhibit submissive behaviors. They don't seek comfort from alien species. They certainly don't roll over for belly rubs. Unless, Director Kresh chimed in with crystalline clarity, we've fundamentally misunderstood their psychological makeup. What if Shadowmaw Primes aren't solitary apex predators at all? What if they're social creatures who've been isolated from proper pack structures? Senator Valdrin's ethereal form flickered with sudden interest. The human recognized something we missed. How? Their species lacks advanced psychological training. They have no formal education in xenobiological behaviors. Down in the arena, Crane had moved on to scratching behind the creature's ears again, which produced a rumbling purr that resonated through the amphitheater's acoustic systems and made several delegates cover their hearing organs in discomfort. "Sorry about the volume," Crane called out cheerfully. "He's been alone for a while, I think." Sometimes, when social creatures get isolated, they become more emotionally expressive when they finally find companionship. The casual way she diagnosed complex psychological conditions in apex predators while providing impromptu therapy sessions made Dr. Voss question everything he thought he knew about human capabilities. "Captain," he called out. "How did you know the creature? He wouldn't attack you?" Crane paused in her scratching to consider the question. "I didn't, actually. But he looked lonely, more than dangerous. When you've been around enough scared animals, you learn to recognize the difference between aggression and desperation." "Scared animals?" Voss repeated weakly. "This is a Shadowmaw Prime, the apex predator of known space." "Right. And he's been starved in a metal box for a week, surrounded by strangers who obviously see him as a weapon rather than a living being," Crane replied, resuming her attention to the creature's ears. "Of course he's scared. Anyone would be scared in that situation." The Shadowmaw Prime made another of those plaintive vocalizations, this one directed toward the observation areas where the delegates sat in stunned silence. "What is it saying?" demanded Director Kresh. "I think," Crane said slowly, listening to the creature's continued vocalizations, "he's asking why everyone is so far away. He wants to meet people properly." "Absolutely not," Voss said immediately. "Fairy, under no circumstances will delegates be permitted to approach an active apex predator." The Shadowmaw Prime's response was to look directly at Dr. Voss with what could only be described as disappointment. Then it made a series of soft sounds that sounded suspiciously like conversation. "He says you're being rude," Crane translated with obvious amusement. "Apparently, refusing to introduce yourself properly is considered very poor manners in Shadowmaw society." "You can understand its communications?" Senator Valdrin asked, her psionic abilities clearly picking up something the others were missing. "Not exactly understanding," Crane admitted. "More like feeling what he means. It's similar to working with nonverbal trauma patients. You learn to read emotional context and body language instead of relying on words." The research assistant finally arrived with emergency food supplies, approaching the arena with the kind of careful terror usually reserved for handling unstable explosives. The Shadowmaw Prime perked up immediately, its attention shifting from Crane to the approaching meal with obvious interest. But instead of lunging for the food like any starving predator should have done, the creature looked back at Crane expectantly. "He won't eat unless you feed him," observed Ambassador Dex with scientific fascination. "The creature has formed an immediate social bond and now requires the human's participation in basic survival activities." "That's..." Voss started, then stopped because there really wasn't a word for what he was witnessing. "That's impossible. Apex predators don't form instantaneous pack bonds with alien species." "Apparently they do," Crane said, accepting the food containers from the terrified assistant. "The question is, why did it take us this long to figure that out?" She opened the first container and offered it to the Shadowmaw Prime, who accepted it with the delicate care of someone receiving a gift from a beloved family member. The creature ate slowly, savoring each bite while maintaining constant eye contact with Crane. "It's treating the feeding as a social ritual," Director Kresh observed with growing excitement. "This isn't just hunger satisfaction. This is pack bonding behavior. Which means," Senator Valdrin added thoughtfully, "that every previous encounter with Shadowmaw Primes has been misinterpreted. We've been treating social creatures as solitary monsters." The implications were staggering. If Shadowmaw Primes were actually pack animals who had been driven to apparent aggression by isolation and misunderstanding, then the entire galactic approach to their species needed immediate revision. Captain Crane called out Delegate Thyra Moonwhisper from the Harmonious Assembly, her voice carrying clearly across the arena. "What else can you tell us about his emotional state?" Crane considered the question while offering the creature another food. Container. He's been lonely for a very long time. Not just the 7 days of starvation, but years, I think. He keeps trying to tell me about his family, but it's hard to understand the specifics. His family? Voss repeated. Pack members who were separated somehow. He's been looking for them. Crane scratched behind the creature's ears again, producing another rumbling purr. That's why he recognized me, I think. Humans have the right social instincts to be temporary pack members. The Shadowmaw Prime finished the second food container and moved closer to Crane, resting its massive head against her shoulder in a gesture of complete trust and affection. Remarkable, breathed Dr. Haleon Pex from the Scientific Consortium. The creature is displaying attachment behaviors typically seen in highly social species. This could revolutionize our understanding of apex predator psychology. More than that, Director Kresh added with crystalline insight. This could revolutionize our understanding of humans. Their species appears to possess intuitive capabilities for interspecies communication that surpass our most advanced xenopsychological training. Ambassador Dex looked thoughtful. The human recognized emotional patterns that our instruments missed entirely. Either their species has unprecedented empathic abilities, or we've been approaching interspecies relations completely wrong. Probably both, Crane said cheerfully, now sitting cross-legged while the Shadowmaw Prime arranged itself around her like a living fortress. Humans tend to anthropomorphize everything, which most species find annoying. But sometimes, projecting your own emotions onto other beings helps you recognize universal patterns. Universal patterns? Senator Valdrin inquired. Loneliness, fear, hope, love, the basic emotional experiences that most intelligent species share, even if they express them differently. Crane gestured to the massive predator who was now using her as a pillow. He's not actually that different from a lost dog, just significantly larger and with more impressive teeth. The comparison between galactic apex predators and domestic Earth animals should have been insulting to everyone present. Instead, it was starting to make uncomfortable sense. Dr. Voss called out Chancellor Zeth Karavos from the High Court of Reason. I believe we need to discuss the implications of this demonstration. Voss looked around the amphitheater at 47 species worth of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations, all staring at a human who was providing emotional support to a creature that should have killed her 10 minutes ago. The implications, he said weakly, are that everything we thought we knew about human capabilities was wrong. Not wrong, Crane corrected gently. Incomplete. You were looking at humans as potential threats or resources to be managed. You never considered that we might be useful as friends. The Shadowmaw Prime made another series of conversational sounds, this time directed at the assembled delegates. What is he saying now? Director Kresh asked. Crane listened for a moment, her expression growing thoughtful. He's asking if you'd like to try being friends too. He says humans taught him that making new friends is always worth the risk of getting hurt. Humans taught him? Voss repeated. When? How? Not me specifically, Crane clarified. But he's met humans before. Somewhere, somehow, members of my species helped his people. That's why he recognized me. That's why he trusted me immediately. The revelation sent ripples of shock through the amphitheater. If Shadowmaw Primes had previous positive contact with humans, then the entire premise of today's demonstration was built on false assumptions. Where? Demanded Ambassador Dex. When did this contact occur? I think, Crane said slowly, listening to the creature's continued vocalizations. That's a longer story than we have time for today. But he's offering to share it with anyone brave enough to come down here and ask properly. She looked up at the assembled delegates with a challenging smile. Any volunteers for interspecies diplomacy? The silence that followed was broken by the unexpected sound of applause. Slow, deliberate clapping that came from the human delegation section, where 22 other Earth representatives had been watching their colleague revolutionize galactic relations through the simple act of kindness. One by one, other delegates began to join the applause. Not the polite acknowledgement of a successful demonstration, but genuine appreciation for something unprecedented and beautiful. Well, Dr. Voss announced to the amphitheater, his voice carrying clearly over the growing applause, I believe we can officially conclude that the human assessment protocol requires significant revision. I believe, corrected Chancellor Karavos with obvious satisfaction. We can conclude that humans have just demonstrated the exact qualities we want in galactic citizens. Captain Crane scratched behind the Shadowmaw Prime's ears one more time, producing another of those resonant purrs that somehow managed to sound like contentment, gratitude, and hope all at once. So, she called out to the assembled delegates, "Who wants to be friends?" The answer, as it turned out, was everyone. And that's how humanity earned galactic citizenship, not through displays of strength or intelligence, but by teaching an entire civilization that sometimes the most advanced technology is simply knowing how to be kind to someone who's scared and lonely. The universe, as humans often said, was about to become a much more interesting place. 3 hours later, the grand amphitheater had transformed into something resembling an interspecies social gathering rather than a diplomatic tribunal. Dr. Voss had given up all pretense of scientific objectivity and was currently taking detailed notes while Ambassador Dex attempted to communicate with the Shadowmaw Prime using a combination of hand gestures and questionable vocal imitations. No, Crane corrected patiently. He's not threatening you. That's his way of saying hello. Try lowering your head slightly and making a softer sound. Dex attempted the suggested approach, producing a noise that sounded like a malfunctioning air recycling unit. The Shadowmaw Prime tilted its massive head and made what could only be described as an amused chuff. He thinks you're funny, Crane translated with obvious delight. He wants to know if all reptilian species sound like broken machinery when they're trying to be friendly. For broken machinery? Dex sputtered, his scales flushing an indignant shade of green. I was attempting sophisticated intervocal communication protocols. Right, and he appreciates the effort, Crane assured him. But maybe try just being yourself instead of following protocols. He responds better to genuine emotion than formal procedures. Director Kresh had overcome her initial caution and was now close enough to examine the creature's unique fur patterns. The optical absorption properties are remarkable. The follicles seem designed to manipulate light wavelengths in ways that shouldn't be biologically possible. The Shadowmaw Prime noticed her scientific interest and carefully extended one massive paw for closer inspection, moving with the delicate precision of someone handling valuable equipment. Fascinating, Kresh chimed, her crystalline form refracting rainbows across the creature's dark fur. The cellular structure suggests adaptive camouflage capabilities far beyond simple pigmentation changes. He's showing off, Crane observed with amusement. Shadowmaw Primes are apparently quite proud of their natural abilities. He wants you to appreciate the craftsmanship. Craftsmanship? Senator Valdrin inquired, her ethereal form hovering closer to the group. You speak as if the creature views its biology as artwork. Don't you? Crane asked reasonably. Every species develops unique adaptations that reflect their environment and culture. He's sharing something beautiful about his people with someone who has the scientific background to truly appreciate it. The Shadowmaw Prime made a series of complex vocalizations while gesturing toward Senator Valdrin with obvious curiosity. He's asking about your psionic abilities, Crane translated. He's never encountered a species that exists partially in energy form. He wants to know if you can sense his emotional patterns the way humans do. Valdrin's form flickered with concentration as she focused her abilities on the massive predator. After several moments, her expression shifted to one of profound surprise. This is extraordinary, she announced. The creature's mental patterns are incredibly complex. Not just intelligent, but creatively intelligent. He's composing what appears to be poetry about the experience of meeting new friends. Poetry? Dr. Voss looked up from his frantic note-taking. Apex predators don't compose poetry. This one does, Valdrin confirmed. The mental imagery is quite beautiful, actually. Something about how different species create harmony like instruments in a cosmic orchestra. The Shadowmaw Prime rumbled with pleasure at having his artistic efforts recognized and appreciated. He's been alone for so long that he started creating art to keep himself sane, Crane explained softly. Mental poetry. Songs he could only sing to himself. Stories about finding his pack again. Isolation doesn't just hurt physically. It damages the creative spirit. Chancellor Karavos had been observing the interactions with the focused attention of someone re-evaluating fundamental assumptions about galactic society. Captain Crane, this creature's people. Do you believe they all possess similar capabilities? Emotional intelligence, creativity, Social bonding? Crane considered the question while the Shadowmaw Prime settled more comfortably around her. Probably. Social species tend to develop those traits together. If he's any indication, Shadowmaw Primes are probably natural artists, philosophers, and community builders. Community builders, repeated Ambassador Dex thoughtfully. The very species we've classified as solitary apex predators might actually be among the most socially advanced beings in the galaxy. Which raises the question, Director Kresh added with crystalline precision, of how many other species we've misclassified due to incomplete understanding. The implications were staggering. If the galactic community had fundamentally misunderstood one of the most feared species in known space, how many other civilizations had been dismissed, avoided, or treated as threats due to similar failures of comprehension? The Void Singers, of the Outer Rim, suggested Delegate Moonwhisper. We've always assumed their communications were aggressive because of the volume and frequency. What if they're not aggressive at all? Senator Valdrin mused. What if they're simply trying to be heard across the vast distances of space? What if they're calling out for companionship? The Crystal Hunters of Bellatrix Prime, added Dr. Pex. Their habit of dismantling technology might not be destructive behavior. It could be curiosity-driven research. The Shadow Dancers of the Nebula Clusters, Dex contributed. Their tendency to avoid direct contact might be cultural politeness, rather than hostility. Captain Crane listened to the growing list of potentially misunderstood species, while the Shadowmaw Prime made encouraging sounds that needed no translation. He was clearly pleased that his new friends were beginning to think differently about the galaxy's inhabitants. This is what humans call a paradigm shift, Crane observed. The moment when you realize that your basic assumptions about reality need updating. How? Demanded Dr. Voss, his scientific worldview still reeling from the day's revelations. How did your species develop the ability to see past these assumptions when civilizations with millennia of advanced research failed? Crane scratched behind the Shadowmaw Prime's ears thoughtfully. Maybe because we're still young enough to believe that the universe is full of friends we just haven't met yet, instead of threats we need to defend against. Young civilizations are typically more prone to dangerous optimism, Chancellor Caravos pointed out. True, Crane agreed. But sometimes dangerous optimism is exactly what the universe needs. Someone has to be willing to assume the best about strangers before you can discover whether you're right. The Shadowmaw Prime lifted his massive head and made a long, complex vocalization that seemed to encompass gratitude, hope, and joy in equal measure. He's saying, Crane translated with obvious emotion, that today he learned the most important lesson of his life. That family isn't just the people you're born with. Family is anyone willing to sit beside you when you're scared and offer you food when you're hungry. The amphitheater fell silent as 47 species absorbed the profound simplicity of that statement. And now, Crane continued, he wants to share that lesson with his pack. He wants to bring them here to meet all of you properly. His pack? Dr. Voss asked weakly. There are more of them, Crane confirmed, with a grin that should have been terrifying but somehow wasn't. Lots more. And now that they know the galaxy is full of potential friends instead of enemies, they're very excited about the possibility of proper introductions. How many more? Chancellor Caravos inquired with the careful tone of someone trying not to panic. The Shadowmaw Prime made a cheerful sound and held up both massive paws, extending claws to indicate numbers that made several delegates reach for their emergency communication devices. Oh, Crane said brightly. Just a few million. Give, or take. And that's how the Galactic Council learned that the universe was about to become a much more crowded, much more interesting, and much more friendly place than anyone had ever imagined.